Tyler Bertuzzi has officially arrived for the Maple Leafs. We'll recap his big night against the Avalanche as the Leafs get their 7th win in a row, and it's Monday. How about a little mock trade Monday to get your day started? All that more coming up on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. What's going on, everyone? What's going on? Dave, hope you had a splendid weekend, my friend.
Well, it's always nice when you see the Buds on a winning streak or see it continue.
Yes, did see it continue. They absolutely did. It was a nice, a bit of a change of pace win from the past, right? Usually you look at the course of this winning streak, the Leafs have been, pretty dominant. They've been getting off to pretty good starts. This was one where they had to come back and they completed the comeback, and then final minute, Colorado was pushing, but Toronto able to keep them out of the net. Samsonov, big save on Nathan McKinnon there at the buzzer, basically, right before the game came to a close. They won 4-3, kept the winning streak alive. But this game will forever be known as the Bertuzzi game, because this was his coming out party as a Toronto Maple Leaf. It wasn't that long ago, Dave, that we were talking about this guy going like 30 games without a goal. And he finally scored one about a week and a half ago. And he's got a couple without another goal. And then it was his birthday on Saturday. And he celebrated it with not one, not two, but 3 goals, my friend. A hat trick for Tyler Bertuzzi to lead the Leafs to victory this past weekend. How impressed were you by his performance?
Oh, I mean, it was heroic. The Leafs, like, if it wasn't for the Bertuzzi hat trick, not sure they pull off that win.
Probably not.
Right? And so who knew all it took was him turning, having a birthday to have a big breakout. I'm sure the celebrations were quite splendid afterwards too. But what I liked about it, look at where all 3 goals were scored. All 3 were in his kitchen. And what I like especially is we've been talking about it for all season long. This guy has been so snake bitten. The numbers suggest he should be putting up way more goals.
Yes.
Right? He leads the team in expected goals because he's not cheating. He's doing what needs to be done to score goals. It's just he's had the worst luck I've ever seen a hockey player ever have.
Yeah.
And guess what? He hit a post earlier in the game, so he actually should have had 4 goals in that game. But yeah, he was doing everything right, and he was rewarded for it.
Yeah, and look, it wasn't just the goal scoring. I mean, obviously that's, the sexy thing that we'll pull away from this game, but like he was out there blocking shots. He ended up with 3 blocked shots on the night. He had a really big one. I remember in the first period that he was kind of hobbling, but he was good to go. Obviously, went out and scored a couple of Genos afterwards. On the power play, he's kind of taken over that John Tavares spot in front of the net. He's, 2 of those 3 goals came on the power play last night. So he's really doing good things at 5-on-5, obviously on the man advantage. And this is the Tyler Bertuzzi that I think that the Leafs thought they were going to be getting, or at least that Brad Treliving thought that they'd be getting. Not a guy who's going to score a hat trick every night, but, someone who's going to contribute to this team and be a legitimate top 6 scoring threat. Because, this is a guy who you looked at and you're like, this is a 25 to 30 goal scorer who brings an edge to the game. That's what the Maple Leafs were buying this past summer. And up until this point, he's brought a little bit of an edge, but the goal scoring really has not been there at all. He's sitting on 7 goals, 6 goals for the longest time, finally got his 7th. And now he's up to 8, 9, 10 on the year, if I'm not mistaken, after this hat trick. So finally cracked the double digits. If he can, like, if this is the difference here, and this is where his season turns around, and this is the Tyler Bertuzzi that we get the rest of the way leading into and including the playoffs, because that's going to be important, then, man, this is going to be a big development for the Maple Leafs going forward.
Yeah, because this is what I envisioned. Like that, I mean, did I envision Tyler Bertuzzi scoring hat tricks every game? No, but I envisioned him being in those, just playing that style that no one else on the team had really done. Right? Leafs didn't generally have a guy that was willing to kind of get into that, the nitty gritty, piss off the opponent, and his style of play is just so different that I think a lot of people didn't have a lot of patience for him. Like, let's not forget, he struggled last year too, and then he ended up leading the Bruins in goals.
Yeah, once he got to
round exit.
Boston, he unlocked something, but yeah, he was struggling a little bit in Detroit. Now that team wasn't very good, and he wasn't playing with good players.
Yeah.
Unlike here in Toronto, I mean, he was playing to start the year with Marner and Matthews, and he couldn't really get it going. And then for the longest time, he's been with Tavares and Nylander, couldn't get it going. But they made that switch. Max Domi came up onto the second line, and they found something, man. There's some real potential in the second line here with Nylander, Tyler Bertuzzi, and Max Domi. For the longest time, I guess, it made sense to have Tavares up there, and it was, you got your pairs that Sheldon Keefe always relied on. Matthews and Marner are a pair, and then Tavares and Nylander are a pair. But like, William Nylander is good enough to drive his own line, so you could throw a Max Domi up there, and that he can be a piece of the puzzle. Obviously, Domi can, but like, Nylander's good enough to drive a line, and if that's the case, that allows them to move Tavares back down to the third line. Now you got three lines that are going, and then when you get the fourth line, who's played well of late as well, this is a buzzsaw of a team, man. Like, the way that they've played, it was an impressive road trip that they just went on. They got to come back home now, and they'll play the Vegas Golden Knights again. So you're gonna play another top team, this time in your own building. But they just went undefeated on the road, and they beat, the last two Stanley Cup champions along the way. Vegas was on the second night of a back-to-back, and this one up in Mile High, where the team goes down early, and they had to fight back and claw back, and they completed the comeback. They've getting some really impressive wins here, Dave. Some really impressive wins here of late. We'll see how much longer they can keep it going, but 7 in a row, that's a statement. When no more than a month ago, we were looking at this team thinking, do they deserve to be invested in at the trade deadline? I would say at this point, yeah, they've shown that if they just get a couple more pieces, maybe they can make some noise if they continue to play this way.
And also add that game against the Avs, they don't win that game if Ilya Samsonov doesn't play like he did. Like, he was unreal.
Yeah. Shout out to Samsonov as well. Yes.
Like, not even just that one save on the goal line. I don't even know how that puck didn't go in. But
on Rantanen? Is that Rantanen or
is it? No, it was it Colton? Ross
Colton.
But like, all night, the Avs had their chances. Like, how many odd man rushes, chances in tight?
37 scoring chances against is what Natural Stat Trick clocked them in at throughout the night. 37 scoring chances against the Maple Leafs. And Ilya Samsonov.
5-on-5, the Leafs are outchanced for high danger chances, 13-7.
Yeah.
So almost pretty much double the high danger chances. Your goaltender stood on his head. Did his job.
Yep. 100%. I will be curious, man. Like, so Joseph Wall started his first game of his rehab or conditioning stint, whatever you want to call it, down with the Marlies, and everything I read said he looked pretty good. Still not ready to play. I think they have another game on Wednesday. I would be shocked if he started in that game, and then next weekend maybe is when he comes back and helps the Buds, gets back into the fold here. But it's going to be interesting to see how they go about, the tandem when Joseph Wool's fully healthy. Because, like, to me, Ilya Samsonov has taken the job back as the number one. Like, I was having a conversation last week when I was filling in on Overdrive, and I had asked that question to Jim Ralph, Leafs color guy, on the radio, and he was giving his answer, and he said, yeah, it'll probably be a 1A. We'll see what happens. But Jonas Siegel, our good friend over at The Athletic, I saw him in the corner of my eye because we were both filling in that day, and he was shaking his head. He's like, no, I don't think so. And I don't know, man. Like, I look at the way Samsonov has played, the way that he's, kept this team in it, and his numbers since he's returned. I don't know how he doesn't go back to being the 1A. I'm not saying that he takes, starts 4 to 5 games or 5 out of 6 games or anything like that, but he certainly is, on top of the pecking order, I would say, in the 1A, 1B conversation when Joseph Wool gets back, I would think. What about you?
The one thing you have to ask yourself is, do you trust Ilya Samsonov to go out in a must-win game and win that game? Right now, I have a better faith that he can do that than I did a couple months ago. And I can understand people still might feel differently because, but this is not a small sample size for Samsonov. He's been doing this ever since he came back.
He did it all last year too. Like, he's played better hockey in a Leaf uniform for a longer stretch, and he's played bad hockey. Let's also remember that.
Let's not forget this. The issues Samsonov was dealing with were not technical. It was clear. It's now becoming as clear as day that this was between the ears. He said it. He acknowledged it. So what did the Leafs do? All right, we're going to get you away from this. We're going to let you get yourself reset. And that's what he's done. Now, do I think Joseph Woll has a chance to make a case to still keep in the running? I do.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. By me saying this, I'm not saying that there's no way like the game one starter is going to be Samsonov. Sammy still has to continue to play this way. But if he does continue to give you, what's he had, like a 9-11, 9-12 save percentage since he's returned? If he's a 9-12 save percentage goalie down the stretch and into the playoffs, I mean, you're going to roll with that guy as your dude. I think that the Maple Leafs, as of now, if Samsonov can continue to play this exact same way, night in and night out, just like he has over the last few weeks here since his return, and there's no reason for me to believe that he will lose his job to Joseph Woll. Not to say that Woll can't go out and earn it, or if play dips from Sammy and Woll, starts playing well, that Woll can reclaim that job. But as of now, I think it's Samsonov's to lose again, as opposed to Woll's to go out and grab.
Yeah, and let's be honest here. Like, we also know that they're going to need 2 goaltenders. Samsonov has dealt with injury issues in the past. Even Joseph Woll, like, the reason why it's taken so long is he's not as comfortable pushing it, right? He wants to make sure he's good.
I also do want to acknowledge, like, we all talk about Joseph Woll like he's the savior and he's the GOAT and the greatest goaltender, in Toronto and forever. But this guy's played 26 games at the NHL level. 26 games. We don't really know exactly what we have in Joseph Woll. Played well prior to the injury. Absolutely. He was a rock star goaltender for many games prior to getting hurt. And he was great for Toronto when he came and filled in for a couple of the games in round 2 last year prior to being eliminated. But there's still, some question marks as to what Joseph Woll is at the NHL level. I like what I've seen so far. I do. But 26 games, let's hold the horses before we anoint this guy, the starter, the number one clear-cut guy going forward when he gets back after missing a few months here. Like, this will be like 30 games since he's played. It's been a long time since this guy's been in the pipes, been between the crease. All right, let's kind of put a bow on this conversation here and look forward to what's going on in Leafland. Leafs have won 7 in a row. Last one being a 4-3 win. They do not play tonight, but they play tomorrow with the Golden Knights coming into town. But with the night off, Dave, I thought that it'd be a really fun opportunity for us to kind of do a little bit of a mock trade Monday. We both have come up with a mock trade that we like. We're going to present it to each other on the other side and then give our thoughts on it and talk about it and see what the Maple Leafs might be able to do 12 days from now or 11 days from now, whatever it is. I think it's 11 days from today up until the NHL trade deadline. So we'll have that conversation on the other side. Little trade talk to get you through a Monday. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Our sponsor once again today is Camino Consulting. You've heard of our online families and couples course and taken advantage of the Locked On 25% discount running to the end of the month. But what about the live seminars? In both sport and business, the challenge in differentiating candidates and recruits is an endless battle. Everyone can demonstrate their measurables and qualifications, but we all know it is the intangibles that matter when those things are similar. Contact Camino Consulting for their team and management seminars to get a peek behind the curtain and watch your next recruiting class or hiring group become one of the most effective you've ever seen. Both because you identified the right candidates and because you've learned how to communicate and motivate them in accord with their own preferences. But you aren't in business or working with a team? We pay referrals. Make some money making your workplace and favorite teams better. Every group works together better at the end of the year than week one. So contact Camino Consulting at caminoconsulting.ca and get on the fast track to understanding. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti. We are a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast. You can find our pod wherever you do get your podcasts at. Also up on YouTube, it's Locked On Leafs. We got new content coming out each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. Speaking of Friday, 2 Fridays from now, next Friday, is the NHL trade deadline. The Maple Leafs have yet to make a move so far this season, so we're not exactly sure what to expect. And it's the first NHL trade deadline under the helm of Brad Treliving, so it's a little bit of a different taste than what we're used to under Kyle Dubas, obviously. But we thought that it would be fun here, Dave and I, to kind of tee things up a little bit, get the creative juices flowing, and a good time to start trade season talk with a little mock trade Monday. So both Dave and I have come up with a mock trade that we like, that we want to present to each other, and we can kind of discuss the deal afterwards. And I put it out on Twitter as well, asked for some of you guys to get back at me with some of the trades that you think are something you'd like to see. So at the end of the show, a little bit later on, we'll talk about some of the trades that you guys submitted as well. All right, Dave, do you want to go first? Or you want me to go first?
I want you to go first. It was your idea in the first place to bring this up. So,
all right. I will go first with my trade. So I thought of 2. Do you want me to go with like the depth deal or the Blockbuster deal?
go with the depth deal first.
Okay. So the first, so again, the problem with doing the depth deal first is the depth deal becomes, you don't have to do it if the Blockbuster deal. So I'll start with the Blockbuster actually, because the depth deal is just in case this other deal does not happen. So we're going to start with obviously what we all know needs to be addressed, and that is finding a right-handed defenseman, right, to plug into the top 4. We keep hearing from all these insiders that the Maple Leafs are kicking tires on a lot of different right-handed D around the league. And so I went right to the source, the team that's got a couple of them that are available. And I think we could get a twofer, Dave. I think the Maple Leafs could really get aggressive and really upgrade their blue line and potentially go after 2 of the Calgary Flames right-handed defenseman. Yes, that's right. It is a blockbuster, pal. This is a blockbuster for sure. And it is one that I have been able to get this team cap compliant with as well, I might add. But the way to get it done, okay, Rasmus Anderson and Chris Tanev. Those are the targets for the Maple Leafs, okay? Rasmus Anderson and Chris Tanev, both big, heavy right shot defensemen, rugged defensemen. Anderson, good two-way guy. He's got a couple more years left on his contract as well at 4.55. He's a dude who honestly could be, a top pairing-ish defenseman. Like, he's a really good 2-3 in this league. He's turned out to be a solid player. And we've all talked about what Chris Tanev and what he can bring, the intangibles, the ruggedness, the toughness, the shot blocking, the hitting capabilities, and just the stay at home defensive prowess that he brings. So both of these players, I think, would absolutely benefit and enhance this blue line immensely. Now, how do you get it done, Dave? How do you go and get yourself not only Chris Tanev, but Rasmus Anderson as well if you don't have any second round picks and apparently no prospects is what I keep being told as well. The prospect cupboard is barren is what people keep telling me. Well, you tell me if you think this is enough to get it done, okay? So supposedly the deal that would get a Chris Tanev trade across the finish line would be a second round pick. Well, the Leafs don't have a second round pick, but I don't think they're willing to throw a first round pick at him either. So I think you're going to have to try and get creative. And this is why I decided getting two defensemen for the price of one. So it's Rasmus Anderson and Chris Tanev, okay, for the Leafs first round pick in 2024, the Islanders' third round pick in 2024. So a first, a third. Fraser Minten, you're going to have to give to get. I think Fraser Minten is the player that they probably could live with giving up more so than Easton Cowan, who just broke an OHL record, or London Knights record for points in games straight. Nick Abruzzese, and I'll explain why I'm adding him in just a moment, and Timothy Liljegren. So let me tell you the full deal again, okay? It's Rasmus Anderson and Chris Tanev for a first-round pick, a third-round pick, Fraser Minten, Timothy Liljegren, and Nick Abruzzese. And the way you make it work cap-wise is you got to get Chris Tanev double retention. So you're going to have to give up an additional fourth-round pick is typically what it costs teams to park 25% of a contract. And so if you do that, you get the Flames to retain 50%. You get another team to retain 50%. They get a fourth round pick for doing so. And all of a sudden, Chris Tanev's cap hits at 1.125. Rasmus Anderson's cap hits at 4.55. You send down a couple of players, and all of a sudden you can get a 21-man roster that is fully cap compliant. So you'll have at least one player additionally on your roster, and that's the deal. That's the deal. That's what I think will be a blockbuster trade. Now, do I think this is going to happen or all that realistic that it could happen? Not particularly. But I tell you, man, if you add Rasmus Anderson, you add Chris Tanev to this lineup, to this blue line, now all of a sudden you've got Riley, Tanev, Brody, Anderson, Benoit, McCabe. That's a pretty darn good blue line to go along with what we've seen from this group of forwards over the course of the last couple of weeks here. That would be a big-time deadline.
Yeah, I mean, a buddy of mine the other day was like, what would it take to get a Rasmus Anderson out of Calgary? So it's like, it's interesting. As soon as you brought up Rasmus Anderson's name, I'm like, oh, now let's see how this works. Like, and I understand some people are going to say this is a hefty price. You have Rasmus Anderson under contract for a couple more years.
Yes.
I think you can get Chris Tanev signed if you pretty much take Brody's deal. Now, not the exact $5 million, but some of that money can go to Chris Tanev, right? That's how you can make this deal not look as bad if you can get both those guys to stick around.
Yep. Right? Yeah. Even if you don't get Tanev to stick around, I think bringing these guys in, like this to me, Dave, you could argue against it. But to me, I look at this blue line and you add those two players, two top four rugged right shot defensemen who play a playoff style game. You add that to this group, to this team, that looks like a cup contender to me. And
It
I
does.
think it's worth paying that price just to give you that opportunity to win a cup this year. And then even if Tanev leaves, you still have Rasmus Anderson, who's a top three defenseman in the NHL, two-way defenseman at that.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, right? Rasmus Anderson is one of those defensemen that don't get talked about enough, right? Because everyone's talking about Tanev, they're talking about Hannafin, and look, is Calgary looking to move Rasmus Anderson? Likely not. They don't seem to want to do a full out scale back, but at the same time, this is a team that needs to go in a different direction here, right? And they're going to get assets for they can make out like bandits at this trade deadline if they do it correctly.
Yeah,
especially with Noah Hannafin, like they got to get that deal done. That's the more important deal for them, I think, than Tanev. But they can't just sit on Tanev and hope that a first round pick comes. They might have to get a little creative to squeeze as much value in Tanev as possible.
Yeah, and look, I think Minton at this point is valued like a first round pick. He should be. This guy was almost in the NHL. He was in the NHL this year to start the year. I think he would be valued as a first round pick around the league. So it's almost like you're getting essentially 2 first round picks. The way that I looked at the deal is you're giving up 2 first round picks. You're giving up all right, I'll break it down. You're giving up a first round pick in Fraser Minton, essentially. For Rasmus Anderson, and they are giving up Liljegren and a third for Chris Tanev. And you can throw Bertuzzi into one of those deals. To me, that's one where it's like him and Matthew Coronado were a really good pair together at Harvard for a couple of years in college. The two of them were outstanding together. So I think that he would just be an attractive asset to push this over the finish line for Calgary. And Toronto, I mean, doesn't seem to have much use for this player, to be quite honest with you. He's just really buried down the depth chart at this point. So kind of a throw in to give him, a change of scenery for a guy who's now 24, 25 years old. Maybe he can try and do something in Calgary and reunite that himself with Coronado, one of their top prospects. Whether it's at the NHL level or at the AHL level, but that's why he was included in this deal. So it's almost like, Bertuzzi, Minton in a first for Rasmus Anderson, and then Liljegren in a third for Chris Tanev at double retention, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a deal like that will be hard to happen. I get that, but that's the sort of like, if you want to go and really reshape your blue line in one big move, that's the way to do it.
That was my like fantasy land YOLO GM trade, right? Like that's, again, I don't expect that to happen, but that was like, you want to make a bold trade. You want Brad Treliving to come in and throw his, on the ground and be like, hey, we're going for it this year. That's the type of deal that would be going for it. That's for sure. Putting your stamp on things, trading away, a top prospect, a couple of draft picks, and Timothy Liljegren, who I would say has probably upped his trade value over the course of the last 2 weeks. For sure. I think other teams would look at that and be like, this guy's got something. This guy's got something. I'm curious. I want your thoughts below. Is that an overpayment for those two? Let me know down below. Really quickly, just the other trade that I had, the, depth trade, I suppose.
Not as exciting one.
The not as exciting one. That, the reason why is because if you make a trade for Anderson and Tanev, you no longer need to add to your blue line, obviously. And this would be, you don't land Tanev, you don't land Anderson, you don't land any of those top defensemen on the market. What about Ilya Labushkin? Former Toronto Maple Leaf. You know that he has had success in the past working alongside Morgan Rielly. At this point, that might be what we're looking for, is just a Morgan Rielly D partner. If you like what you see out of Liljegren, you like what you see out of Brody together, you've got Benoit McCabe. Now you bring in Lyubushkin to play alongside Morgan Riley. You've got 3 D pairs that you've seen work, work, and it wouldn't take a whole lot to make it happen. This past offseason, Lyubushkin was traded from Buffalo to Anaheim for a 2025 4th-round pick. So I wouldn't imagine it would take a whole lot. You do have the Islanders' 3rd-round pick if you want to make that deal and maybe throw them an extra pick or perhaps see what they would want. Maybe they can even retain half of that contract. There's one more year after it, but wouldn't imagine Anaheim's in any contention window where they wouldn't, will want to add picks or prospects to keep a little bit of cap behind. So I think that would be, a decent little depth deal if nothing big were to happen with the Maple Leafs.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally possible given how prices are like right now for players.
Yeah. All right, let's take a quick break. Let's come back and let's get to your mock trade Monday offer. We'll do that next. Today's show is brought to you by Sleeper. It's almost a halfway point in the season, Leaf fans, and regardless of where we are in the current standings, I want to remind you that you can win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleepers, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleepers are our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey. Because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether studs like Matthews or McDavid or Crosby or Marner, whoever will record more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in any given game. To win 100 times your bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Leaf fans. You can win 100 times your money by playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's Mike DiStefano, and I've got Dave Morassutti with me as always. We're your host here at the Locked On Leafs podcast. We're 11 days away from the NHL trade deadline, and we figured it'd be a fun time to do a little mock trade Monday. I just went over a couple of trades that I liked and thought would be interesting for the Maple Leafs. Dave has one for us. Now, I will give you the floor, my friend.
Yeah, so almost a similar vein to your Blockbuster idea. I just included a different team. I don't know if this trade is going to be possible for 2 reasons. One, I don't know if the team is in a sell mode right now because they're still technically in the hunt for a wild card, but they've also been a team that's had very up and down play this year, and that's the Seattle Kraken.
Exactly where you're going. Love it.
As a couple of defensemen that I like. Now, we can get ambitious and go with the Mike DiStefano special of going for 2 guys and try to really bulk it up, or you can go after one guy. So I'm going to start off with going after the one guy first, because I think if you try to add in the second guy one, it's going to get really expensive and really tough to pull off. But I've been on the Adam Larsson train for a while here, because I think if you're going to add a right shot defenseman, add one that's going to fit exactly what you need, and I think Adam Larsson does it. So if you're going to get an Adam Larsson, it's going to be costly. I think it's going to have that first round pick involved. I think you're going to have to send a body the other way, a contract. So Connor Timmins is like the one defenseman I'm adding to it. You're going to also have to add a player off the roster, and I think this is where Nick Robertson comes into play. Whether that's
Nicky Boy, huh?
Trading away Nicky Boy, because Seattle doesn't. They're always looking for scoring. They don't have enough scoring, and they've tried adding so many different players like Tolvanen, and they got guys, but I think they need more, especially lower in the lineup depth guys. I think Robertson's really upped his trade value. I just don't know if those 3 pieces are enough to get it done. So I think the Leafs might have to sweeten the pot a little bit in some way, shape, or form. But that's the framework of a a Larson deal I'm looking at. Now, if the Leafs want to get crazy here and add another guy, there is another right shot defenseman who also has another year on his deal. And that's the other thing with Larson. He's signed for next year. So that's kind of the theme of giving up that first round pick. Plus, you're getting a guy who's signed for next year. William Borgen is that other guy. So if you can add Larson Borgen, that's one there where maybe you can include a prospect like maybe a Fraser Minton. Because
you think William Borgen would cost a Fraser Minton?
No, but if you're going to add him to the deal. Now, the other thing, too, is I think you're going to have to retain salary on one of those guys. Because I don't know if the salary is going to work with just adding those guys on. Because Larson's got $4 million. Borgen's got 2.7. So now, can they get away with maybe going with like a Topi Niemela? That might be a more attractive option for me because Fraser Minton giving him up, I'm not a fan of. But if you're doing, let's say, now you can take Nick Robertson out of the deal and you could put in a Fraser Minton instead if you're not crazy about trading Robertson. But I would rather trade Robertson over a Minton. It's just if you're going to add a guy with term, that's going to cost you a bit more because, teams, whenever they're trading someone with term, it's going to cost more. Now, I think Borgen probably lands around a second round pick if he were to get moved. And I've heard his name being thrown out there. Again, Seattle's not in a position where they say, oh, we're going to sell. So I think a team's really going to have to be aggressive if they want to go out and get them.
Interesting. That wasn't the name that I thought you were gonna put on the table here. Will Borgen, a little bit off the radar. But I remember when he was in Buffalo prior to the expansion draft, and he was the player that Seattle took from Buffalo in expansion. Our good friend over at Locked On Sabres, Joe DiBiase, was a big Will Borgen fan, and he was livid when the Sabres did not, protect Borgen and allowed him to be exposed and evidently taken by the Seattle Kraken. He thought he was going to turn into a really good, solid two-way defenseman for the Sabres. And, well, he's turned out to be a good, solid two-way defenseman, just not for the Sabres, for the Seattle Kraken. Fraser Minton might be a little rich. Like, I think Will Borgen on a cup contending playoff team is probably like a third pair guy.
Well, I'm saying you're going to add Borgen to the Art Larson deal.
I know that, but like if you already have a deal done and you're adding Borgen, so then you have to add something else. I don't think Minton is the add.
What would you add? I think maybe Niemela might be a little bit easier.
Easier. Oh, I think there's a big gap between them. Minton and Niemela.
Oh yeah, because Niemela's older. He's going to be eventually out of that prospect realm very soon.
Yeah, like the Leafs surprisingly actually have a couple of decent goalie prospects.
And I think Seattle is desperate for goalies.
Yeah, like I don't think Hildeby would be a guy they'd want to move on from, but they've got a couple of dudes out in Russia. Artur Tiamov potentially could be an option to add in there. Again, I don't think he would land you a Will Borgen, but I don't know. I would think maybe like a B level prospect, not an A level prospect.
That's fair. Probably a little rich on that. Even Peksa is another goalie.
Yeah, Vyacheslav Peksa is another one out there. Like I don't know, like that Islanders third round pick might be enough to do it.
I was thinking about that too. That third rounder might still be valuable enough because it is the Islanders pick. It is going to be probably going to be a lower pick, not that much lower than what a Leafs third rounder would have cost. They also have some fifth rounders. Got 3 fifth rounders. Take one. Have them. Now, if the Leafs aren't going big game hunting, if they feel that.
But here's my question to you. Is Will Borgen enough of an upgrade on Timothy? Like, is he an upgrade on Liljegren in your mind?
Defensively, I think he is, especially on the PK. They need help on that PK, and he's one of the better ones in Seattle. Like, that's his thing.
Yeah.
Really, and he plays a lot in the defensive zone. Like, he is that
So
guy.
if you're adding an Adam Larson and you're adding a Will Borgen, you're taking Liljegren out of the lineup?
You might have. Well, right now I would have, because Ben was there. because Larson would go with Riley.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would. It'd be close. It would be close because I don't know if Sheldon Keefe trusts Liljegren enough. Like, there's been a good sample right now for Liljegren. It's just as it gets tougher, will he be able to handle it?
Yeah,
think
I don't
that-
know. Like, I'm not saying this because I think that Liljegren for sure is better than Borgen or Liljegren
Mhm.
deserves to be in the lineup. I'm legitimately asking you,
Yeah.
like, because if you're making a deal to better yourself and you're giving up picks and prospects, like, you better hope that Borgen is that much better than
Yeah.
Liljegren if you're giving up like a
And look, Seattle
Nimola or
might even ask for Liljegren in this if they're going to give up both guys.
instead of Robertson, maybe they ask for Liljegren to, enhance the blue line.
Yeah, replace kind of what they're giving up. So that could
Possibly.
be.
Liljegren does have good, like, analytical numbers, and
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken, like, that team, they
They love their analytics. And look,
like the numbers. They like the numbers.
and if there's anyone that knows Liljegren, it's that Seattle coaching staff.
Yeah, with Hackstall, was he around when Liljegren was here?
He had to have been.
He might have been with the Marlies still, though. I don't think he was a regular. He might have been in and out of the lineup, but
Let's see. From 2019 to 2021. So maybe like kind of seen bits of him. Like he would have
Yeah.
had to have seen him at some point.
at some point, probably.
Now, if the Leafs decide they don't want to go big game hunting here, if they just want to add, let's say, an upgrade on the Riley side, because right now it's Lagesson.
right.
If they feel like they just need to get that one guy. William Carrier. I've been a big, even if just Adam
Alex Carrier.
Oh, sorry. Why did I say William?
I'll take a William Carrier too. I love me some Will Carrier
from Vegas. Yes,
from Vegas. We'll get both. Will Carrier, one of the best fourth liners in the NHL.
I actually wouldn't mind that either, but Vegas ain't selling. They need to add players. They're not. They have the infirmary going in Vegas again. No, Alex Carrier. I think Nashville. They got guys like that they can go on and really make things help their future out, because that team is not going anywhere this year. Let's be honest.
Yeah,
like they might even trade UC Saros if the right offer comes around. But Alex Carey, I think even you add him to the other side with Riley, I think that's a better upgrade on the right side than what you got right now. I think he's an underrated player, and you can probably get him for a cheaper price, like a third round pick. You might even add a sweetener with a conditional pick below that as well.
Yeah, I like Carrier. I do like him as a possibility.
I think he's going to get a lot of suitors, and that might drive the price up.
Well, actually, since we brought him up, I recently reached out to our friends over at Locked On Predators to ask about Carrier. I reached out to Anne, and I asked her, like, hey, we're thinking about I asked her, curious, how would you describe Carrier's game? Because I knew that we were going to bring him up at some point on the podcast. And she said this, quote, Carrier has been an interesting player. He's not necessarily a physical player, but he's very smart and has worked on being a bit more offensively minded in Brunette's system. He does best with a consistent partner, and he and Jeremy Lauzon have been solid for Nashville this season. Off the ice, he's a good person. And I followed up that asking her about physicality, if there was much physicality, because he's not a big guy. Like, that's the thing. He's not a big guy, but I've always thought that he held his own well. So I wanted to get her thoughts on it. And that's basically what she said. He's not going to be a big physical player, but he did say that he's strong, but not a heavy hitter. But he can hold his own. So
he's not going to shy away from physicality, but that's not as big a part of his game.
Yeah. Like, he's not a big, massive hulking guy. He's not Jake McCabe who's going to throw his weight around or anything like that. But he's not going to get pushed around either, which you can decide what you want, if that's what you want, if that's the direction the Maple Leafs want to go in. That doesn't necessarily scream a tree living kind of guy, but he is a good defenseman in my estimation. I like, you bring up Will Borgen. Like, if you're looking to just grab a depth guy, like, that would be a possible depth add realistically. Like,
and he's a guy you'll have around for next year.
Yeah, like even if you can't get it done for Adam Larson, because that might be a little bit difficult.
Mhm.
Hey, see if you can get Borgen cheap out of Seattle. I think that wouldn't be bad. Like Borgen's kind of in that Labushkin, Alex Carrier. Like these guys are all very similar. Where it's like, okay, what's it gonna cost to you? Like a second, third round pick, maybe a B level prospect to get it done, most likely. So, um, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens at the trade deadline. Lots of options, that's for sure. Lots and lots of options for the Maple Leafs here.
Yeah,
You got any?
the
Go
lot
ahead.
like because I keep hearing there's not many options, not many options. There's just not that stud like absolute number one defenseman out there, and there's never going
Yeah,
to be. People need to temper their expectations. Noah Hannifin's probably the only top tier defenseman, and even then, like people aren't putting him in the Norris Trophy race, right?
yeah.
And like
Um,
again, like the reason why the Leafs aren't going to go after him is because he ain't signing here. He is
and
going
he's
to
a left
retire.
shot. They need a right shot.
Yeah,
There's also that.
they need to stop with they need another right shot. It's
Yes.
apparent, and there aren't any teams aren't giving them away.
No. Really quickly, I asked the good people of Twitter to give me some decent trade offers that they would want to see the Leafs make. There were some decent ones, and there were some
Not so decent one.
not so decent ones where people think that you can give up your garbage and get absolute studs coming back. And then there's a lot of people here. There's a lot of Matt Dumba trades here,
Yeah,
and I
our
don't
buddy.
know how to tell people this, but Matt Dumba's not very good at hockey anymore. This isn't 2016. Um, you're not giving up valuable pieces for Matt Dumba.
Here's the
Sorry to
thing,
tell
and
you.
I know why it is. And my buddy James over at Offside Hockey Talk, big fan of the show.
Yeah,
They see Matt Dumba as that physical guy who once in a blue moon played with Morgan Riley at the World Championships, and they thinking that reunion could be possible. But that was years ago. Matt Dumba has been through some injuries. He's also not. He's more of an offensive type guy. You need stability. Like if Luke Shen had stuck around with the Leafs, or if Luke Shen didn't sign that deal with Nashville, he'd be a guy I would want to play with Morgan Riley. That's the type of player that the Leafs need to get to play with Morgan Riley.
Ilya Labushkin. Bring
Yeah,
him back,
yeah,
right?
Ilabushkin would be the next, like the Luke Shen 2.0 option. Just maybe
Well,
cost.
Luke Shen was Ilya Labushkin 2.0,
He was. He actually caught. That
right?
was probably the better deal in terms of value and what the Leafs gave up because it was only a third round pick.
Yeah.
And he played top
Um,
four.
I'm just looking at some of Dumba's numbers. Wait, that's not it. Yeah, some of Dumba's numbers this year. And granted, he's playing for Arizona. It's a pretty crap team, but it's not great. Like his he's given up 30 scoring chances against per 60, 13 high danger chances per 60. Given up he's been on the ice for over 3 goals per 60 minutes. It's not good. The numbers are not glowing, and the eye test tells me too that Matt Dumba's well past his prime. So there were a lot of Dumba's trades out there like this. Jared Brown, well, Dumba for Topi Niemola and a 4th round pick. Pass. I will pass on that.
Dumba on the Wild was also much different because he actually had decent players playing with him in Minnesota as well. So it can
Yes.
look a little deceiving.
Yeah, yeah. A couple other decent trades that some of the listeners or some of the people who responded to this on Twitter had. Tyler, not Tyler. That's a guy from high school that I went to. Alex Carrier and Dante
We
Fromm.
just sorry, Carrie. Eventually, if you do become a Leaf, we will remember your first name.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. He was a twin that I went to high school with, Tyler Carrier. Tyler and Justin Carrier. Shout out to those two. But Carrier or Fabro, one of the two, and a Colton Sissons, apparently, for a 1st and a 5th. Seems a bit much, but it's not terrible. Topi Niemola and a 4th for Sean Walker. I don't hate that. I
Yeah,
don't know how valuable Niemola would be around the league though. Like I don't know if that'd be enough to get shot. I feel like Leaf fans value him too much.
The Athletic put a nice little piece on how he's progressing with the Marlies and how he's, quietly been a really good defenseman for them. The issue is he's not blowing people's opinions out of the water. Like people aren't going, every deal the Leafs should be including Niemela to get a really good defenseman back. Just it's not something that people, and maybe just not enough people are watching Topi Niemela, and that could be a reason too.
Yeah. Let's see another good one. Here's one where your boy Adam Larson was involved in one. This is from Majam 1994. Matt Agent maybe. Timmins, Gregor, Niemela, and a third for Adam Larson and Pierre-Edouard Bellemare. Larson at 25%. Again, I don't think that's nearly enough. That's one of those ones where it's like, take all of this crap and give us your good player. Don't see that one come into fruition. Someone was on my wavelength, I guess, with Kadri and Rasmus Anderson, with $2 million retained on Kadri's contract for the next 5 years, apparently 6 years here. Interesting. For Robertson, Minton, Niemela, a first and a third. Don't think Toronto wants to be making that deal. As good as Kadri was, I don't think his best days are behind him. I don't know if bringing him in will necessarily help this club. Adam Larson for a first, Connor Timmins and Roni Hirvonen. Now that seems like a decent little trade. That's by West Coast Leafs. Larson for a first, Timmins and Hirvonen. That seems like something I could get behind. Something that seems pretty realistic, actually.
Yeah, I mean, some people got a little too ambitious, and some people are undervaluing the Leaf stuff a little bit here.
That's just what always happens here. Always is going to happen. Someone believes Wazoo 99 thinks no trades, keep your draft picks. Maybe add a depth defenseman for a 5th round pick. Doesn't believe any trade out there could have any impact. I don't agree. I do not agree with that take. I think the Leafs have proven that they deserve to be invested in this year and make some sort of trade. Luke Lyman stole Alex Venberg and Will Borgen. Your boy Borgen being included in a deal here. Wenberg at 50% retained. For Ryan Reeves, Topi Niemela, Artur Akhtiamov, a 1st round pick in 2026, and then the Islanders' 3rd round pick this year. That's quite the trade.
Yeah, because Seattle, the analytics darling, are going to go after Ryan Reeves.
Yeah. I just don't see that one happening. To be honest, that one I'm not sure I could see happening. Minton, a 1st, and Samsonov for Markstrom and Tanev. Like, I would make that trade. I don't think Calgary would make that trade if I had to imagine.
They are going to get a haul from Markstrom if the New Jersey Devils pony up.
Yeah,
as they should be.
Yes. What's another one here? Yeah, see another Dumba one. Minton and a 3rd for Matt Dumba at 50% retained.
Why are we doing this?
I don't get some people think that he's still a really good player. Hillsy 1828 says at Matthew Hills says Nick Robertson and a pick for Adam Larson. Could get it done. Could potentially get it done. David McIsaac thinks David Savard. Didn't give me a trade, but said David Savard for question mark.
I've heard that Savard ain't going anywhere. He doesn't even want to leave Montreal. I don't even know if he has trade protection.
So how's this one to you? Jan Ruta and Luke Cunnin, who actually I believe was part of 31 Thoughts this past weekend or Saturday Night Headlines or something, as someone that's gaining some interest from San Jose. For Steves Lagesson, a 3rd and a 5th.
Don't hate it. If Jan Ruta can not be as bad as he's been in San Jose, I'd consider it. He was really good for Tampa, not as good for Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
That might have been more the Hedman effect than anything else.
Ooh, Martzy99. Is it a possibility to look at Seth Jones? I think he
No.
could bring some spark back there. Right shot, large body.
Terrible contract.
Awful contract. He's
Yeah,
making
you got.
9.5.
I'm sorry. If you're going to complain about all these deals the Leafs have signed, let's start bashing some of the other teams who have had some really, really bad deals.
TML fan in Van had a really good point on Twitter. Bertuzzi and Domi learning how to play hockey at the deadline is our best pickup. Kind of
Yeah.
true.
I mean, look.
If it continues,
Everyone talking about how brutal the Leafs were at the beginning. None of the guys were producing. All the new guys should have been brought in. Now that they're starting to, teams are starting to play better, right?
Yep, sure
Now,
are.
just need, but the issue is you need a lot of things to kind of go your way to make it happen.
Yes, and it's going to be fascinating because we're talking about a lot of blue liners and defensemen on all of these trades. I don't see a whole lot of people asking for any forwards, and are we sure that this is what we're going to get from Domi and Bertuzzi the rest of the way? Are we going to get this out of the third line? Is Bobby McMahon going to score a bunch of goals here going forward? Like, are we set with the forward lines? Because neither of us came up with a trade that included a forward, and neither did any of the 20 people that responded to me on Twitter with these. So maybe that's a conversation we could have tomorrow. Like, what's our confidence level in this forward group? And should all of the focus be on the blue line, or does Tree Living still maybe need to work on a third line center or a middle six winger of some kind to add some secondary offense? That's a conversation we could have tomorrow, though, pal. Let's put a bow on today. That is going to do it for us on today's podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. Go ahead, leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Comment down below if you got a trade request that you'd like to throw at us. Potentially, we'll take a read and we'll let you know our thoughts. Or you could let us know your thoughts on our trade offers that we had. But that'll do it for us here today. We're back with another episode for you guys tomorrow. Maple Leafs game day. They'll be back in action. We'll help tee up the Leafs and Golden Knights part 2 in the last week. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.